Hello, I'm Katherine Kerfoot
And I'm Bradley Watson.
from the Grayson branch of the Gwinnett County Public Library. At the library, we serve as the teen reps. Lately, we've been thinking about dystopian fiction. So today, we're going to delve into the genre, cover some popular young adult examples of it, and discuss how today's young adult dystopian fiction differs from classic dystopian novels, exploring the history, characteristics, and popularity of dystopian fiction. We also have some suggested reads and how to find the right dystopian novel for you.
There can be no dystopia without its opposite, utopia. What is a utopia? Well, the idea of a utopian society was first written about in 1516 by Thomas More. His book, Utopia, is a tale of a fictionalized voyage where an island is discovered and it is described as the perfect republic. More coined the word utopia, which literally translates to mean nowhere, his perfect world. A utopia is a place, a state, or condition that is perfect in respect to politics, laws, customs, and conditions. If a utopia is a perfect world, then is a dystopia an imperfect one? Dystopia is literally an unhappy country, and the word was coined in the 1740s. Dystopias are generally a futuristic imagined universe in which oppressive societal control and illusion of a perfect society are maintained through corporate, bureaucratic, technological, moral, or totalitarian control. It is a fiction that presents a negative view of the future of society and of humankind. Dystopian worlds can be apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic, but they must be anti-utopian, a utopia turned upside down, a world in which people try to build a perfect republic only to find that they had created a tyranny of misery. The Time Machine by H. G. Wells, written in 1895, is an early dystopian novel. In Wells' story, his traveler builds a time machine and travels into the far future, finding what he originally perceived as a utopia, but on closer inspection realizes that it is a dystopia. Wells' story ends with the traveler disappearing into some unknown past or future, unwilling to stay and perhaps to try and prevent the dystopian future that he has seen. In other classic dystopian fiction, the ending can be just as bleak. George Orwell's 1984, published in 1948, presents a world tightly controlled, giving its citizens no hope of even free thought. Winston Smith, the main character of the book, tries to rebel but is ultimately broken and the world continues on as before. In the two former examples, the main characters were adults, but in William Golding's 1954 novel, Lord of the Flies, the main characters are children, boys stranded on an uninhabited island after a plane crash. The idyllic island life is quickly overtaken by two factions battling each other for control until no one is safe. Rescue comes at the end, but after what the boys have done to each other, will they ever be able to live normal lives again?
So, how has young adult dystopian literature changed from the classic adult dystopian literature? Published in 1993, The Giver by Lois Lowry is considered to be the beginning of young adult dystopian literature. Up until The Giver, most dystopian novels centered on the character's inability to fight against the oppressive society with no hope for the future. Young adult dystopian novels have slightly changed some of the characteristics classic dystopian literature used as a mainstay. In 1984, and an earlier Russian novel titled We, our protagonists are downtrodden and without hope, living in a bleak, tightly controlled society. Look at the protagonists in more modern YA dystopian fiction. Katniss Everdeen of The Hunger Games, Thomas from The Maze Runner, Connor from Unwind, or Triss from Divergent. Each of these characters lives in a society tightly controlled by a governing body. Yet the characters are not so downtrodden. They are willing to break out of the molds they have been forced into, and incite or participate in rebellion. With the publication of The Hunger Games in 2008, young adult dystopian fiction really takes off, and now ends on a more optimistic note than classic dystopian novels. The world around them may not be perfect, but the characters haven't given up and are striving to improve it. Dystopian worlds are generally set in the future. We know the exact time period in the novel 1984. But in many of the worlds, the time is just the future, be it near future or very far future, such as in The Time Machine, where the traveler ends up in the year 802,701, according to the reading on his machine. How these dystopian worlds come about usually falls into several common categories: war or revolution, natural or ecological disasters, or technological advancements that don't turn out to be a great deal for all of the population. War is a common thread in the classic and current dystopian fiction. In Lord of the Flies, the plane load of boys crashes after their school is evacuated because of the impending war. In both The Hunger Games and Divergent, the ruined landscape the characters live in points to past destruction due to war or revolution. The Maze Runner's world is originally destroyed after solar flares, leaving much of the world uninhabitable. While technology drives the dystopian lives in M.T. Anderson's Feed, Scott Westerfeld's Uglies, and Neil Shusterman's Scythe.
Whether a dystopian world is created by man, nature, or technology, it has to be controlled in some way. Control is tantamount in the dystopian society. Societies where only the few enjoy the luxuries of the good life must find a way to suppress the masses. Bureaucratic and governmental control are evident both in classic and current dystopian novels. In the 1924 novel We by Russian Yevgeny Zamatin, all of the citizens are given a number and not a name. They live in glass houses so that there is no privacy. In the world of Panem, the districts must offer up tribute in the form of their children so that they continue to pay for revolting against the central government. Corporate control can be seen in the 2002 novel Feed. In this dystopian world, corporations directly feed commercials right into the citizens' brains, controlling their buying habits and day-to-day decisions. In 2002, cell phones were common. Maybe you remember what a flip phone looks like, but they were nothing like the smartphones we have today. Imagine that those messages that you were constantly receiving on social media and via text were not on your phone, but were in your head. If you didn't enjoy playing along, unplugging may cost you your life. If you've read any of the series that begin with Uglies, you can see the control asserted over Tally as she approaches her 16th birthday. She's looking forward to becoming pretty, later realizing that the operation makes her easier to control as well. 16 seems to be a watershed year. In The World of Unwind by Neil Shusterman, published in 2007, when you reach 16, you could be unwound if you happen to be an orphan or a problem child. But if you really want to talk about technology making a utopia and then turning it into a dystopia, look at The World of Scythe, also by Neil Shusterman. Here, there is no death, and the Thunderhead, a self-aware computer, rules. Without death, there will be overpopulation because birds continue. Enter the sides, public workers who glean enough of the population to keep resources in balance. Veronica Roth's 2011 book, Divergent, introduced us to a world divided into factions whose philosophical makeup controlled how you lived your life. At 16, one must choose to stay within the faction they grew up in or to turn their back on their family and choose a new faction. The philosophical differences in the factions are intended to make society better as a whole, but only serve to fracture it further as the factions fight amongst one another. Nature, or man's interference with nature, also creates control for our dystopian societies. In The Maze Runner, solar flares reduced the area of Earth where people could continue to live. A man-made plague then made matters even worse for the population already fighting for limited resources. In Philip Reeve's Mortal Engines, published in 2001, the Earth is in a bad way after war has left it broken, and the scarcity of resources and technology creates a dystopia that can't be saved using weapons from the past. We've talked about how dystopias come about and how they are controlled, but how do the characters react in these situations? In both the classic dystopias and the current YA dystopias, the societies view individuals not as partners or even participants, but as resources, cogs in the societal machine working not for the individual, but only for the greater good. In The Hunger Games, Katniss is satisfied to live her life in District 12 as long as she can keep her family together. It is only when her sister's name is pulled for the Hunger Games that she sees the true rot at the core of Pan Am. As the social commentary goes, the Hunger Games author Suzanne Collins is quoted as saying, "I was channel surfing between reality TV programming and actual war coverage when Katniss's story came to me." In Uglies, Tally is so excited to become pretty, it takes her friend's questions and escape to help her realize that there is something terribly wrong. Again and again, our protagonists want to believe that everything should be this way until a seminal event catapults them into the thick of things and they choose to fight. In Unwind, the character Lev is a tithe set to be unwound as a religious gift by his parents. Not until he falls in with Connor and Risa does he even question this path. In Scythe, Citra and Rowan become apprentice sides. They take on this position to protect their families, but realize that not all sides are as fair as their teacher.
Dystopian literature is built with social commentary in the stories themselves. Both Thomas More in Utopia and H.G. Wells use their novels to comment on their societies. More envisions a world free from corruption and inequality. And to put it in perspective, Thomas More's eventual boss, quote unquote, is Henry VIII of England. And things didn't quite work out so well for More. He was beheaded as a traitor for refusing to recognize Henry as the head of the Church of England. Wells was a socialist and used the time machine to comment on the inequality of the English class system. He saw the simple Eloi as the descendants of the British upper crust, unable to do things for themselves, and in the Morlocks, the serving classes, taking care of the Eloi, but not without the Eloi sacrificing a few to continue the lifestyle of the many. Wells was often chided for using his novels to deliver political views, something that is very common today. Classic dystopian novels, such as We, 1984, and Lord of the Flies, drew upon society's fears during the Cold War era, when the Soviet Union was in power. Many of the current dystopian novels are driven by the destruction of natural resources, as the aforementioned The Maze Runner and Mortal Engines. In The City of Ember, by Jan Duprow, published in 2003, the entire society lives underground after an unnamed war, living on meager rations with energy running low. As with the classic dystopian novels that mirrored the fears of the readers, so too do today's crop of young adult dystopian fiction. For instance, The Hunger Games accurately depicts one of the ways an authoritarian government would keep dissidents in check: pageantry. President Snow uses the Hunger Games glamour to keep the people in the capital distracted enough to not realize how morally bankrupt the games are, and the appeal of finally having enough food and some comforts to keep the especially poorer districts in line. Everything about the games, from the fashion the tributes wear, to how they present themselves when demonstrating their skills, to their personas when they're interviewed, is artificial. When something genuine is displayed, as when all the tributes held hands in solidarity in catching fire, it is shut down with prejudice to minimize the damage. Even the people living in the capital protested the games after that broadcast was shut off. And the star-crossed lovers side plot? Pageantry. And technically, so is the Katniss-Peeta-Gale love triangle. Why is dystopian fiction so popular? For one thing, it's exciting. Dystopian novels are filled with action. Our protagonists are either running for their lives or running toward rebellion. It also has a healthy dose of romance. Where would Tris be without four? Mystery abounds. Why are Thomas and the other boys living in the glade? Is there a livable world outside the City of Ember? Dystopian literature also encourages the reader to look at the world around them. Are there questions that should be asked about the status quo? I think the biggest difference in classic dystopian fiction and today's young adult dystopian novels is the journey the characters make throughout the story. Today's dystopian novels are coming-of-age stories where our protagonists grow through navigating a world that is often out to get them. Again, looking at Katniss's character in The Hunger Games, when we first meet Katniss, she wants nothing more than to survive. Being thrown into the games, she is first unwilling to listen to her mentor Haymitch and make herself more attractive and interesting to the audience. As the games progress, she also finds that she simply can't act for herself, but seeks out first Rue, then PETA as friends and allies. By the end of the games, she has learned very well how to play against the Capitol and saves her own life and PETA's. Now we've talked about some pretty high-profile novels. Now I'd like to share a few others that you might find worth your while to read.
The Gone series by Michael Grant follows a group of teens after an event in which everyone 15 years and older goes poof. Left on their own, you might not be too far off to describe this series as Lord of the Flies with superpowers. Currently, there are 8 books in the series, with a 9th to be published. The Shipbreaker series by Paulo Basagalubi. Life in the Gulf Coast after natural disasters of rising water and superstorms due to climate change. Naylor and his friend Pima, along with genetically engineered Tool, help Swank Nita find safety. The Fog Diver series by Joel Ross. Join chess in a future where technology used to clean the earth becomes humanity's undoing when the nanites turn against humanity, creating a fog no one but chess can stay in longer than a few minutes and driving the rest of humanity to the mountaintops.
The Last Dogs series by Christopher Holt. If you're a fan of Aaron Hunter's Warriors series, The Last Dogs might be for you. This series follows 3 dogs as they try to find out what has happened after their people inexplicably disappeared. The Edge of Extinction series by Laura Martin. Jurassic Park meets the City of Ember. In the not-so-far future, cloned dinosaurs rule the Earth and have driven humanity underground. Skye is determined to find out what has happened to her father, even if she has to leave the safety of the bunkers and venture above ground.
Thank you so much for joining us today for our discussion on dystopian literature. Remember that you can check out all of the books we discussed at your local library.